Please be seated. What a joy to be with you this morning. I bring greetings from St. Patrick's in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, and the numerous people told me to kidnap the Dolmans and bring them back. Out of love for our mutual ministry, I will attempt to refrain. But let me tell you how much you Dolmans are missed back home. Not only does St. Patrick's miss having a real preacher and a gifted curate, but in your absence I realize how much of a dear friend and a confidant you have become. I miss you all. You taught me a great deal. However, it is a little nice to be away from St. Patrick's today. You see, there was a little issue. An issue which ensued into a discussion in the parish hall, and it continued out into the parking lot. You see, on Friday nights, we have lots of 12-step groups that meet, and they have a Friday night dinner once a month to celebrate birthdays, honoring those years of recovery and sobriety. It's a great thing. In fact, if you want to see lives changed and the power of God working, go to those meetings. It's beautiful. But also being a Friday in Lent, we also had a big scheduled organ music Stations of the Cross with meditation thing. Well, it had been on the schedule since August. So a discussion arose about which group should get dibs on our limited space. Some argue that being hospitable to our friends and members in recovery, that should dictate that they get preference. Others suggested, well, worship is the primary thing we're about. I mean, we are a church. Both sides are right. Outreach, engaging those outside of ourselves is what we're called to do as a church. And yet worship is central. In some ways, it was the perfect collision of values. Being the wise, tenured rector that I am, I made the only sane choice. I decided to come to Emmanuel and Shawnee. You're going to find that's the blessing to have curates. Let them cut their teeth on it. I thought of that, though, when studying the gospel for this morning. The text your deacon read comes right after the most definitive sign in the Gospel of John. It's the raising of Lazarus. A sign telling very clearly who and what is at work in the person of Jesus. Jesus is Lord of life, and following him, we will know what it means to be raised. So the disciples do what Episcopalians typically do. They decide to throw a dinner party at Mary's house. And Lazarus is at this party also. Amazingly alive. Even though he had just been dead and buried. There he is, propped up on a couch for anyone with eyes to see and hands to touch. Proof that Jesus is the real thing. So the followers of Jesus get into a discussion. In response to Jesus and this sign of God active in our lives, what should we do? Some rightfully say we need to respond to the hungry. Let us use the resources we have in a way that best honors the value of the reign of God. We can sell this perfume for $300 and give it to the poor. Yeah, I know there's that little bit of the text which infers Judas had other motivation, but it does seem that distributing alms was a role in the early community. Jesus did have a preference for the poor. His teaching, fellowship, healings all seem to be disproportionately directed towards the poor, the lost, the last, and the least. Those seem to be his favorites. Caring for the poor is how he showed love, and thus the disciples rightfully thought, well, we'll continue in that direction. But Mary had other values. Being one who had found healing in being embraced and loved, Mary wanted to show gratitude. She did an extravagant act of love. She took the costly perfume and anointed his feet and then wiped his feet with her hair. How symbolic. How intimate. How awkward. And yet, Jesus commends her and says, Mary sees something you guys don't. See, I'm not always going to be here. She's foreshadowing my death and burial, and this is how Mary chose to show love. See, I think it's a gift to the church to hear the complexity of how those who are close to Jesus struggled in finding the right way to show love. It seems that we followers are always going to have this tension in trying to discern, who are we? What should our priorities be? And how do we steward the resources that we have in witness to Jesus? See, it reminds me of those back in Broken Arrow who felt supporting those in recovery is the clearest path. They were just as convinced as those who felt meditating on the cross should get dibs. Both are right. It's two sides of the same coin. I've had the privilege of a long career in the church. And it seems that this tension, this struggling for who we are as the body of Christ is central, though it's rarely articulated or held in balance. And it seems that usually congregations blithely go off in one extreme or the other and forget the other side. And being that humans don't like holding things in tension, we rarely see beyond ourselves. And sometimes that leads to a repetitive cycle of growth and stagnation in the life of a congregation. It's an exciting time in the life of this community. Knowing Father Tom well and getting to work with him for these few years, I imagine you guys are spinning lots of plates in the air right now. There's a new level of energy and enthusiasm. How can there not be with someone who looks like the brawny man? You're undertaking a great building program. I've studied the designs for almost the last year of what you've been working on, and it tells me what you value as a community. Well done. See, the designs tell me that you are a community which values gathering and being formed in relationships. But this design also tells me that it will enable you to be involved in the larger community. Those are good values. There once was a brilliant pastor by the name of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He wrote in his letters from prison that the church is only the church when it exists for others. Not by dominating, but by helping and serving. The church must tell others what it means to live for Christ out of gratitude, to exist for others. That's why the church is missional. See, we are a people who are sent. And this new building will enable you just to do that better. Please don't lose sight of that. But Mother Mary and Martha come to us to remind us that we are also to be a people who come back to spend time at his feet, recognizing the deep gratitude we owe to God. We are to be thankful. A couple mornings ago at St. Patrick's, one of our adult leaders who had just been baptized a couple years ago, he was serving breakfast. We have this feeding program. It's for the food insecure in our area. The numbers fluctuate from 5 or 6 to 20 every morning. We cook breakfast and do a sack lunch. Our only agenda is to get to meet our neighbors and those who come to share a meal. That's our only agenda. It isn't just for the homeless. It's also for the lonely, the food insecure, and children on their way to school. It started as an experiment, and now it's been going on for 6 years. It's called Love Thy Neighbor. Well, we have 60 or so volunteers, and they're scheduled, but every once in a while, someone calls in sick or forgets that they're on the schedule, and a frantic phone call happens, and Kurt just jumps in. He gets up early and goes to the church. He's a quiet guy. Teenage daughter, busy job. But he has this non-flappable way of making breakfast burritos and talking to people. He also just finished a year of chemo and radiation for neck cancer. The cancer has taken a lot out of him. He still gets very, very tired. I felt bad that he had to fill in twice this last week, and he said, "No, Shelby, this is how I can thank God." I said, "I'm alive." He said, "The doctors say that today I am cancer-free." I said, "I don't know if I've got a few more years or not. But in making sure that these guys have a meal before they head off to work, well, that's how I can practice gratitude." Some could argue that it doesn't make sense for a guy in recovery from cancer to use his limited energy up at the church feeding strangers. But like Mary before him, he models for me, for us, the importance of gratitude. Sitting at the feet of Jesus and not just doing, but being grateful. Giving credit to the one to whom all is due. To recognize that all we are and all that we have has come to us as a gift. And the appropriate response is to be grateful.